Okay, it's 7:30, so we'll start the meeting. Good evening, members. Welcome to this meeting of Strategy, Finance and Policy Committee. Can I draw to everyone's attention on page 3 of the agenda, which sets out the details regarding the fire safety instructions and the webcasting arrangements. We have a large agenda this evening, so I will be working at pace to try and get through it, because there are some important items on it that we didn't want to defer if we can help it. So, item 1, apologies for absence. We have received apologies from Councillor Ian Ward and Councillor Gary Myers, and we have Councillor Marriott substituting for Councillor Ward. Item 2 are minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of June. Are the minutes agreed, members? Agreed. Thank you. Item 3, declaration of interests. In regard to item 5, and recognising that many in the room sit on parish and town councils, it's my intention to take that on block. So if all parish and town councillors could raise their hand, we'll note that for item 5. Okay, thank you. Are there any other declarations of interests? No? Okay, thank you. Item 4 is public questions on notice. There are none. So item 5 takes us to the community governance review, and the report begins on page 11. So this report is in relation to a piece of work to get the community governance review updated in order to put our parish and town councillors in the best possible position moving forward. So I trust members have read the report, so I will just open up for questions or debate to see if any members have any questions. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions. I see that the review says we have to finish, the review has to be done within 12 months. Is this realistic? Have we got the resources for that? So I'm slightly concerned about that. My other question is parish boundary changes. If there were some, what is the exact process and how long would it take for the Boundary Commission to adjust them? My final question is, I've got another 2 questions. Is 25,000 enough that we've set aside for this? Given that we've got 2 consultations and various other bits and pieces going on, that kind of feels a bit light given the scope of it. My final question is, given we are expecting government to put some sort of stops in place to prevent, asset disposals and spending outside of normal BAU, is it feasible that assets can be transferred in this time? Sorry, that's the wrong question. I've added that to the wrong bit. Sorry, that comes later. Ignore the last question. Thank you.
Thank you. I will hand over to Greg to answer, who'll be leading on this piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So I think I've got all the questions, but you may have to remind me as we go. But the first one, 12 months is stipulation to start and finish. I believe we will have the resources in place. We are looking to start in a month's time. We're already working up what that programme of work will be. We've looked at how others, councils, have undertaken these pieces of work before, and we are engaging with an organisation that will hopefully assist us in doing so as well. A lot of it is about communication, and we're actually gearing that up as well. So hopefully that has been done before, and we are aware that Chelmsford are also running this process at the moment, so we're just looking at how they do theirs and what they've done with theirs as well. In terms of funding, it's joint funding. It's 25,000 set aside by both authorities. We believe that will be enough. Some of it is being worked through at the moment. That is going on previous experience on previous reviews that have happened, and the amount of information or amount of resource that we may need to buy in for a set period. Were they all the questions, or was there one missed one?
Yeah, I don't know if you answered it, but I missed it, about Boundary Commission, if there were boundary changes.
Thank you. Chair, again, if there are any, so the first part is about consultation, and that is asking for any changes. If any come through, then they will be worked up into the second part, which is the consultation part, and then we'll be working up those parts about the Boundary Commission, how we take it to them, and that reasonable timescale of getting them in time, so that we've got it all in place for the election the following year. But we will be updating you as that goes along.
Councillor Newport?
Thank you, Chairman. I've just got one question on this, and that's under the financial implications. So we know our own financial implications, but obviously if there's a boundary review, that will mean financial implications for town and parish councils. What would you anticipate that to be? Because some councils, they don't all have elections at the same time. Some councils have had elections more recently than others, and they can be very costly. So the taxpayer obviously would have to foot that bill, and they may not have budgeted for that either. So I think that could have a knock-on effect. So what do we anticipate that could be if those changes are made?
Thank you. Again, can't anticipate that at the moment until we get the proposals in the first consultation, then go to the second to see if they get accepted. Then it will be a report that comes back to full council, because that's where they make the decisions on what is going to be proposed moving forward, and that will have all the costings and the implications of what those would be. But we would be in consultation if it is affecting, obviously, a parish and how that works with them at the time.
And just coming back on that as well, one of the pieces of work that's being looked at through LGR is government are asking for parish and district councils and town councils to potentially harmonise their election process. So I think that part of that work will come out in the consultation to make things more streamlined and make more sense for residents and voters. I've got Councillor Hoy next.
Thank you, Chairman. Just two questions. The first one is probably linked to Councillor Newport ones on finance. Got to be the perfect point, haven't you, for this? Where some parishes may be merged potentially, I'm not saying they will, but they could be potentially be merged. There could be the requirement for redundancies, for instance, if there are duplication of positions. Would that be, from what you've said, that would be put forward in the costings? Would that be down to the parishes to pay, or how would that work? And the second question is going around boundaries. If the boundaries of parishes do change, or new parishes are instigated from this, how would that affect that? How would that affect the neighbourhood plans which are going through at the moment? And if a neighbourhood plan has been started but not finished, how would that be affected?
I'll take the easier one first, which is the second question about neighbourhood plans. I suspect that if they've started, then that piece of work would carry on as a joined up authority, or if it's already been in place and then you get two parishes joined together, then there'd be some work that would be, there is a neighbourhood plan in place for one parish. Does the other parish, when they've come together, join one and make a joint one across both? But I can't answer that. That would be down to the parish in terms of what they want to take forward. In terms of where a parish joins together and there's costings involved, again, redundancy you mentioned, that would have to come forward in the future report. However, I wouldn't see that necessarily as a burden for the council, as it were, but I could have to come back to you fully on that in the final report when we bring it.
Thank you, Greg. What I will say is through the engagement that I've been doing with parishes, and they came to a meeting quite recently and there's another one coming up, there seems to be quite an appetite to get this piece of work done. So I think there is support from the parishes to see that happen. Are there any other questions, members? If not, I'll move to the recommendation. Okay, so recommendation is that a community governance review is conducted as set out in the terms at reference at Appendix A. Do I have a seconder? All those in favour? Carried. Thank you, members. Okay, item 6, which starts on page 79, is the digital strategy, including cyber security strategy. So again, I will open this straight up to questions or debate. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor O'Leary?
Thank you, Chair. Just one question. Page, where is it? Nope, sorry, I'm on the wrong item again. My notes aren't very good tonight, I rushed them. I have no questions, sorry.
Councillor Newport?
Thank you, Chair. Just one question, and that's, how is the council mitigating against ransomware threats specifically?
Thank you. Someone want to take that up? Yep, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So we have quite a number of different strategies and technologies that we've started to put into action. We have a 24/7 security operating centre that's monitoring things to look for attacks. We also have deployed types of automation and AI technology within that to look at for patterns of things might be happening. Sorry, can you hear me better now? Apologies. But the other thing for specifically around ransomware, obviously you don't necessarily want to go into too much detail for security reasons, but we are looking at protecting data, making it immutable, ensuring that we have data separations, and then we can move information away from where it needs to be.
Okay.
Is there
Thanks, Tim. Does that answer your question, Councillor Newport? Did you want to come back on that?
No, I'll take Tim's point about perhaps not discussing this in public in detail. And I did have a further question, and if I could just quickly go to Appendix C. I see that obviously there's a lot of work streams there, but the problem with these work streams is that it's not really a plan. There's no dates against this. It just says year. It's quite open-ended, and I would really like to see some of this work, some of the plans against this, because we've got in progress, but it doesn't actually sit with, there's no dates against it to monitor the progress. And I'd like to see that, Chairman.
Thank you. I think that's a good point, given the threat that we do see with some of these items. Maybe this is something we can bring back as an update to a future committee meeting with those dates, that we can see that progression. Would that be possible? Yeah, would that suffice? Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions relating to item 6? Councillor Hoy?
Thank you. Just for a very quick one, I've asked this before around this area. Do we carry insurance for data loss?
Thank you, Chair. No, we don't. It is something we have looked at before when we've done insurance renewals. It's generally cost prohibitive. It's also very hard to secure a policy that would ever be likely to pay out, to be honest, because it's so vast, the risk. So no, we're not insured for it. It's not really something that we could insure ourselves against. It's very rare to do so.
Okay, if there are no other questions, are members happy for me to take the recommendations on block? Okay, so I will read. Oh, sorry, Councillor Newport.
Yeah, Chairman, just on the recommendation 3, could we just add on about bringing back that plan? Just put some wording around that.
Just literally a sentence at the end that says to be brought back to the next committee meeting with updates. Yeah. Is that okay, Jackie? I'm just going to get that word in so it's right for the purpose of the minutes. Okay, so the three recommendations are recommendation 1 that the digital strategy 2025 to 2028 contained within Appendix A be approved. Recommendation 2 that the cyber security strategy contained in Appendix B be approved. And recommendation 3 that the digital action plan in Appendix C be approved, allowing officers to update as organisational policies priorities change, with annual progress reports to committee, or if major changes to the strategy or extra funded are needed. In fact, I'm going to change that altogether because I think it doesn't make sense if we say annual and then, so I think we should just if members are okay with that, I think it's a bit wordy otherwise. So that the digital action plan in Appendix C be approved, allowing officers to update as organisational priorities change, with progress report coming to the next committee meeting, including a plan with dates. Okay. Do I have a seconder for the three recommendations? Councillor Wilson. Okay, all those in favour? Okay, that is carried. Thank you, members. Item 7, the artificial intelligence policy. So again, the report begins on page 115, and I will open this straight up to members for questions. Councillor O'Leary.
Okay, hopefully my notes are okay this time. On page 125, it says personal, special category or commercially sensitive data must not be submitted into any publicly available AI applications. Only a council-approved applications may be used to conduct council business. So my question on that is, will this apply to members or is it just to officers? And if so, how will this be monitored? I'm kind of concerned, are we saying that we're only going to be able to use Copilot? Or, you know, for example, if I wanted to use ChatGPT, would I be allowed to? Thank you.
Thank you. Tim, are you happy to take that question?
Thank you, Chair. At this moment in time, we're recommending that we only use Copilot because it's within our corporate tenancy and we can put guardrails around that. We don't have that protection if we start using public available chat systems as well. So this is mainly about council data and officers and members in their capacity for working for Rochford District Council.
Thank you. I don't know if you've used Copilot, but it's rubbish. So can we not, as part of this review, look at using other LLMs and seeing if we can put any contingencies around safeguarding our data around those, if possible? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I think we actually put that in the policy that we will continue to review AI generative tools and expand when required.
And just for my own clarity as well, because it's a question that I've asked. So this is if you're putting a council report into AI, we only want it to go into Copilot for the reasons that you've set out, but we're all free to use other versions as we see fit for other things, just not council reports or council-specific data. Councillor O'Leary, you want to come back?
Yeah, just one question, one sort of further point actually. What is to stop officers or members then from not doing it? Is it just a good faith thing that you're implementing? There's no way to really monitor it, is there? I guess is my question.
Yes, Councillor, you are correct in that it's very difficult to monitor this type of thing. So the policy is setting guardrails around behaviour so that we can protect personal sensitive data. And so this is stage one. We can then learn to understand, and as technology grows and we grow with our understanding as well, then we can implement more.
Thank you. Councillor Newport and then Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. So the use of AI, obviously, in local government, is becoming more widely used. So how does our policy align with that of other councils? I mean, is there the policy that aligns with the sector as a whole, or are we creating our own unique policy here? And so how will we comply with data protection and copyright laws? How's that going to be monitored using AI? Because as we know, it will pull things from here, there, and everywhere. When I read the report, one of the things that because I know I did shout about this AI policy, but one of the things that I'm very interested in is how is this going to affect our ambitions for net zero as a council as well? How's that going to be monitored, the use of it? How much is the organisation using it? I know Jonathan Stevenson, he's always using it. I mean, I don't think he'd be able to do his job anymore if he didn't have it. But I think that the report doesn't go into detail about that at all. It acknowledges that it uses, it's environmentally harmful, if you like. It's got a big impact. But how are we measuring that? And that's really important, isn't it, to measure, especially when we have these targets that we're aiming for. Is there anything that we've got in place?
If I can come back first on that part, and then I'll defer to Tim for the first part, because it's a question that was raised as well, and Henry Muss has had a look at the policy and given some input. And I think within it, the wording states officers shouldn't be using it for the sake of using it. It should only be used where it adds value and saves resource. We shouldn't be using it as a Google tool, for example, recognising that it is extremely inefficient from a carbon perspective. So it was something that was considered. Tim may add to that, but certainly Henry has looked at this with his hat on as well.
Thank you, Chair. And just to add to this, so this is stage one. This is a policy. This is to start to raise awareness, to put guardrails around, to begin to allow staff to use it so that they feel safe that they're doing the correct thing. So it's protecting that. That will then allow us to focus our energies on other things. So you're exactly right. How do we take this to the next stage? Going back to the previous question of can we use all sorts of other AI tools? One of the reasons why we want to use Copilot is because that's within our tenancy, so we can lock the use of that within our environment. So when we was talking about data leakage or searching here, there and everything, all sorts of information, the use of a Copilot within our own tenancy allows us to manage what large language model is using, but also restrict it to using our data. And so there's above this policy, there's an information governance group that's looking at the wider implications around information governance and data security, as well as working alongside this is the cyber security working group, so looking at the security side of this. So this policy allows us to give that umbrella, so then we can then start focusing on those behaviours and then understanding what tools or technologies we use to enforce the compliance, but also to align that with creating that productivity that we want to bring out of the organisation with the digital strategy that we spoke about earlier.
Okay, do I move on to Councillor Hoy?
Thank you. Again, I'm just going back to prohibited uses. I thought I did understand it, but I just want clarification now after the answers that have been given on that. My understanding is that in the first bullet point, prohibitive uses would be for what we would call exempt items, or for perhaps for strategies or policies or actions being developed by the council which aren't yet public. But in the answers, the words public reports have been used. I mean, I would say that if there is a report which is in the public domain, that there shouldn't be any restriction on any councillor being able to use any AI for that. It's in the public domain already. So I think that's my understanding. Can you confirm that is correct?
Did you want to come back on that, Tim?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, sorry, we've been talking about all sorts of things. It is getting a bit confusing. The key thing about the policy is more around category data and sensitive data and commercially sensitive or confidential, rather than information that's public available.
And just to add to that, obviously, we're looking at this from an officer perspective as well as a member, so they'll be putting together reports before they're in the public domain. So I think that's possibly where it gets a little bit muddy, but good question to raise. Thank you. Are there any other questions on this, members? If not, I will look to move to the recommendations. No? Great. And are you happy for the 3 recommendations to be taken on block? Okay, so the recommendations start on page 115 and read: Recommendation 1, to approve the artificial intelligence policy as detailed in Appendix A. Recommendation 2, to delegate authority to the Director of Customer and Data Insight in consultation with the Chairman of the Strategy, Finance and Policy Committee to make minor changes to the policy as learning from pilots is obtained and AI technologies evolve. And recommendation 3, to receive a future report on the use of AI tools and its impact on the Council's workforce once AI pilots have concluded and a business case has been developed. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilson. All those members in favour? Okay, that is carried. Thank you, members. Okay. Okay. Item 8, Data Protection Policy Suite. The report begins on page 131, and this report is by the Director of Policy and Transformation. I'll open straight up to questions. Does any members have any questions on item 8? No? Okay. We have 2 recommendations. Are members happy for me to take them on block? Okay, recommendation 1, which start on page 131, that the committee approves and adopts the Data Retention and Destruction Policy 2025, Appendix 1, and recommendation 2, that the committee approves and adopts the Surveillance Camera Policy 2025. Do I have a seconder, please? Yeah, Councillor Wilson. All those members in favour? Okay, moving on to agenda item 9, which is the 25-26 quarter 1 performance, and the report begins on page 167. Are there any questions, members? Councillor Hoy.
Not so much a question as a, could I have an explanation and or clarification and a key as well for future reports. We have some reports showing green, I believe. It says green. And we've got arrows going to the right. We've got some showing green with arrows going up. We've got some which are blue with the arrows going pointing to the right. And I have seen some blue with the arrows going up as well. I've seen some amber with arrows going to the right. And I've seen some red with amber going to the right. So I know the arrows are about trends, but I'm a bit confused how something that's being... What does going to the right mean? Does that mean it's on track, ahead of or behind? What does up mean? What does down mean? And it seems a bit inconsistent with the use of the... in terms of the colours and the green. I've got a green going up, but an amber going to the right, for instance, on one. And to me, it doesn't make sense, but I'm happy to be educated on what they mean and why they are like that.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy. What I will say before I hand over to Greg is, as you'll all be aware, these are new reports that have come into this round of committees following the annual report, so that we can keep a track of these KPIs in still not real time, but certainly better than waiting till the end of the year. So we are looking at recommendations that come forward from committees to improve them moving forward. I think I have an understanding of how the arrow system works, but I will hand over to Greg as to not make anything unclear.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hoyt, for the question. And probably a miss on our part, we may need to add a key that helps members understand the arrow system. Where there are, it's green, and I think we do need to work with you on what that chart looks like, and I accept that. Where there are arrows that are horizontal and it's green, it means that it's still on track, but there's been no movement at that point in that period. So that's kind of those arrows that are going to the side. What I can't...
Can I
Yeah.
just come in there? Are the arrows different colours then?
Yes. And apologies for that as well. And
You know what I'm going to say now. I'm
Absolutely.
colourblind, and to be honest, they all look the same colour to me.
Yeah, I've got to take that on the chin, and apologies. We will work with you on the next time that we bring this. Sorry, Chair.
Thank you. And just one recommendation: once something's complete, it probably doesn't need an arrow because it's done. So that might as well just streamline things. But thank you for raising that, because all of these recommendations are being taken on board to make this report as simple to understand as possible. Are there any other questions, members? If not, this item is just for noting. Noted? Noted. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 10, which begins on page 189. This is the quarter one budget update. Do members have any questions or point to raise on this item? Councillor Newport.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. One of the themes that runs through this report, that I can see, is we do seem to have a high staff vacancy factor, and that's very worrying. And I'd like to know what the council's doing to address that, because yeah, it's nice to have underspends, but often that means a reduction in the service that we're delivering for our residents. So what are we actually actively doing to fill those positions, given the challenges that I know the sector has with recruitment, and that's probably being exacerbated by LGR, but putting all those excuses to one side, what can we do to address those vacancies?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Newport. And I think this is concern that members right across the chamber share, and it feels like déjà vu, because we've certainly had this conversation in a number of forums, because it is a constant challenge and a constant concern, especially when we're told people are stretched or resource doesn't allow something, and then we see that we've got vacancies. But I'll hand over to the relevant officer to see if there's any feedback on that. Maybe Nicola, or maybe Greg, or maybe David. Anyone?
So when the budget was set, it was in February, and there was quite a lot of growth items. So there has been a bit of a delay, because this is the Q1 report. There's been a bit of a delay between agreeing the new budgets and actually going out to recruit. But my understanding is that we are going out to recruit. There is some jobs that are a bit easier to recruit to than others. In that case, we have looked at agency staff, and we are trying to resource up, especially in some of the areas where there's quite a lot of growth required. So that's on the asset side, and but just generally, we are trying to cover those posts. But there are a few issues with recruitment, and LGR is not helping the situation. But overall, I think we do have not a full complement of staff, but quite a significantly reduced vacancy factor now, which is why we don't have the same £1 million underspend. It's more to £250,000 currently. And
just to follow on from that point as well, some of the positions that we have filled probably since this Q1 update, the officer supporting with LGR, a project manager within planning policy for the local plan, and licensing and community safety are now at a full cohort. So there have been some great roles recruited too, which will hopefully see an improvement across, or continued improvement across some of the services. But I think we're all alive to the fact that there remains to be challenges within recruitment in the public sector. Are there any other, Councillor Hoy?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of easy questions, I think. First one is paragraph 5 on page 191. about community wellbeing housing, with the underspend of £145,000, one of the reasons is given his leisure contract costs lower than budgeted. Is there a reason why they're lower than budgeted? I thought, I'm a little bit unsure how they can be. Is that because there are certain things that were going to happen, haven't yet happened, such as the pool pods or the changing places? The second question was on the item 6, development, no, not development, I've lost it now. Parking, that was, yeah, sorry, items like paragraph 7, economic development. Off-street parking is predicting an overspend of £54,000, mainly due to a lower than budgeted parking income. So is that really a income being lower rather than, I don't really see that as an overspend, I see that as lower income by £54,000, and that seems quite substantial to me. Have we analysed why that is? And the final question is, I think it's really just a confirmation. I understand that on the same point, I think I've been advised that the vacancies in economic development have now been filled. Is that correct? So that going forward, that shouldn't be an issue, the underspend there.
Thank you. Phoebe or Andy?
Thank you, Chair. So to answer regarding the leisure contract costs, my understanding is at the time when we awarded the leisure contract, we had to make assumptions in the budget. So there's just been a timing difference from us awarding the contract and what the financial management cost of that is against what's in the base budget. We assumed it's likely to be higher, and actually the management cost we are paying part of the 15-year contract is less. And again, we built in an NDR on the Arledge centres, actually everyone active for picking them bills up. Regarding parking income, it obviously is at Q1. I am working with our business partner in the finance team to look at the profiling and look at the last few years to try and to forecast a better trend. Obviously as well, this Q1 doesn't include the 30 minutes free parking as well that we are offering. So when Q2 comes back, we should have a revision to what we're forecasting for the parking income. If we still think it is not being achieved outside of offering the 30 minutes, we'll provide a more detailed explanation. But we are working on that as to looking at previous trends and why we're forecasting it to be lower.
Councillor Newport, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Does the parking income include PCNs as well? And can we see a breakdown of that in the next report, please?
Yep, that's been noted. Thank you. Okay, members, this report is just for noting. If there are no other questions or points to raise, can I take it that it's noted? Noted? Fabulous, thank you. Okay. Moving on to agenda item 11, which begins on page 199. This is the budget setting guidelines for 26-27. And again, this is a report by David Dickinson. I will open up to questions. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very sort of general question, actually. It probably is, applicable across multiple things that we do as a council. Page 202, 3.5, resident engagement. When we engage with people online, I know we ask questions, around characteristics, but how do we ensure that the data we get from this ends up being a representative weighted sample of the Rochford district? I don't know if anyone can answer that tonight, but that'd be helpful for me. Thanks.
Do you want to take that, Greg, or Sat? Steph? No.
Yeah, I'll try and remember what I said. When we go online and ask people questions, we do ask, generally speaking, about characteristics. Are you male? Are you female? What ethnicity you are, etc. Right? But when we extrapolate that data out, how are we ensuring that it's a representative weighted sample of the area rather than, because obviously we tend to be, 60 plus tend to be very engaged, 18 to 25, not so much, for example.
So what I would say is on the last consultation that we did with LGR, that we did that representation across the borough when we looked at the different age groups and also the different areas that were referring to us by postcode, and we were asking those questions, those representative questions. What I can't say is that we've done that on every single one, so it'd be something I need to come back to you on to see if we actually do. So I was trying to see if I could find it on 202, but I couldn't find anything that referred to it. Apologies.
Thank you. And it's my understanding that that section of questions that comes up at the end of the report is actually a generic one that has to be asked now on every survey. How we make sure it's representational is a little bit out of our hands because we can't control who completes the survey, but it's absolutely vital that we do capture the responses like we did with the LGR, and we broke it down into those age, sex and different categories so that we could understand where we're less engaged, shall we say. You wanted to come back, Councillor O'Leary?
Yeah, sorry, just quickly. So I just guess I'm quite interested in how we attribute weight when we extrapolate this information. Again, this might not be an answer you can give me tonight, but someone who is a bit of a nerd and likes psephology, I'm interested to know how the council arrives at that sort of how it analyses that data.
If it's okay, Councillor O'Leary, I think if we get a written response to you with how, because it will be a technical response, I would suggest with how the officers have to do that, and I think that would be a useful piece of information. Thank you. Are there any other questions, Councillor Hoy?
Yes, sorry, it's sort of linked to Councillor O'Leary's question. I thought he was going to get to my question, but he didn't quite get there. So it's also, how many responses would we need for it to be statistically reliable? I'm aware that when we did the survey for the cultural and visitor strategy, for instance, I think it was about, I can't remember the figures now, 380, 480 for it to be reliable. One, is this a reliable statistical sample in itself without the weighting? And if it is, how many people would have to respond for it to be so?
So again, it's my understanding from the research and the learnings that I've had over the last few months that 0.5% is the figure that we have to reach, which would align with what you just said there, because it's around 400 for it to actually be a decent sample, which is why it's so important that we as councillors get out there and try and get people to engage and fill in these consultations, because we know it's not the most interesting of documents to fill in, and members of the public are not necessarily inclined to give us their thoughts. But if we can continue to reach that 0.5 plus, I think we can't do much more than that. But officers may wish to add to that.
Sorry, Chair. Oh, that was loud. Sorry, Chair. No, exactly the same. I would only be repeating exactly what the Chair's just said.
Any other questions, members? Okay, in that case, I would like to move recommendation 1 on page 199, which is that the committee approves the proposed arrangements for the budget setting process as set out in the report. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wilson. All those in favour? Okay, thank you, members. That is carried. Moving on to agenda item 12, the One Team Year 4 Quarter 1 and Quarter 2 update. This is a report by the Director for Policy and Transformation, but again, I will open it straight up to questions. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Hoy.
I would ask one. I know LGR is mentioned within this report. I couldn't quite work out whether or not there is a strand of work going on to, I can't remember the right word, to untangle the One Team should both councils no longer be connected with LGR. So, for instance, if Brentwood went one way and Rochford went another, it looks like it's sort of mentioned, but it doesn't. I couldn't see anything saying that there's any detailed work going in on in how to do that. I know there are ways that we can say we don't want to be, Rochester can say we don't want to be in it anymore, or Brentwood can, but it doesn't seem to be a way which we've spoken about, I've raised before, and I think other councillors have raised before about how we can, when we are forced to disengage with each other, how that works.
Thank you. Would you like to take that, Greg?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hoy. I think for us, we are working on LGR now, and being, I think, a lot of the term you'll hear being LGR ready. Part of that work is looking at all the incidences, issues that we're going to be coming across. What we don't want to do is jump the gun. Rochester Council recently endorsed a 4-unitary proposal, which would keep the two authorities in the same unitary. But what we don't want to do is jump that too early. But we do want to be prepared, and some of the work at the moment will be about what do we need to do to be prepared for LGR when it's announced, potentially March next year, and then the real work in earnest begins. But it's certainly not going under the radar. There'll be work in the background that we are aware of that we need to consider.
Thank you. Yeah, you can come back, Councillor Hoy.
Just very briefly, yeah, I take on board your points, and I take on your board your points about Rochford, but I'd also point out that Brentwood has put forward the point they want to be in a different regime or a different number of authorities or a different new unitary than Rochford as well. So definitely on one side there was an expectation that we won't be joined.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think as Greg set out, until we know what comes back from government, there's not too much point in doing too much work, but we need to be prepared and constantly working towards a solution, whichever authority we end up in, or none, as the case may be, and we may stay the same, who knows. Item 12 is just for noting. Are there any other? Yeah, Councillor Newport.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a matter of detail, really. On the SRO, is Greg taking that role on? I know this document is 22nd of August, but will that role go to Greg in his new position?
I can just confirm we're working through that at the moment. So it hasn't been announced yet, and we haven't made that decision, but we'll make sure members are fully aware as soon as that decision has been made.
Councillor Hoy.
Very briefly, I raised it on a different report, but just mentioned the word arrows again on this report.
Thank you. That will be noted for all of these reports across all committees because we want them to be uniform and sensible. Thank you. If there are no other questions or points, then are members happy to note this report? Noted. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, moving swiftly on to agenda item 13, which is the Formal Complaints Annual Report from 2024 to 2025. So I'll open this straight up for questions. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Hoy?
Not a question as such, but it just seemed like we're performing quite poorly again. Can't find it now. There seem to be areas where we're just not responding very well, or as well as we ought to. I don't know if there's any comments around that. I now cannot find the page I was looking at. Yeah, it's just a general comment. So it's what is the mean? It's got reasons for complaint, time delays, things like that, and number of complaints responded to within a time frame and outside the time frame. And that one I have found, and it's 50-50. So 50% of our the complaints are responded to outside the time frame, for instance. So it just seemed generally that we're not quite getting there still.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy. Obviously, this is a look back over the previous year. So steps are being taken to improve on customer service, and I'm sure we'll bring in the officer to give some response to that. But that's, again, part of the point of having these regular updates quarterly so that we can see those trends, we can see if there are any issues. There are lots of things going on within the customer service team to improve that journey for our residents. But this is a look back, so it's always difficult to give answers as to what's happening or why it happened retrospectively. But I'll hand over and then I'll bring in... I'll hand over. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you're exactly right. This is looking back. We had the implementation of a new formal complaints policy, which has taken some time to bed in. If you even look at Q1 so far for this year, things were a lot better. What's supporting improvement here as well is the governance framework, again, which has taken some time to embed, but these are reported to well-managed authority, which is where the issue is being escalated to directors. So there's a lot better monitoring around these now, and we are seeing improvement. So hopefully you should see that improvement as you get your quarterly reports come through.
Any other questions, members? Councillor O'Leary?
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick one, really, because I didn't quite understand the bar chart on page 225, stage 2 complaints by service. It says stage 2 complaints received and upheld, but if I look, say, for example, at housing needs, it says there were 7 stage 2 complaints, 2 were upheld or part upheld, and 2 were overturned at stage 2. So I don't know if I'm being daft, but what happened to the other 3 complaints, for example? Thank you.
So it would just mean that those other complaints were not upheld. When it says overturned, it would just be that they were not upheld in stage 1. However, the officer at stage 2 actually upheld that for whatever reason. So we are trying to monitor that so we can have a look at how those stage 1s are being responded to.
Thank you. Councillor Newport?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think I've said this before. So we're seeing the formal complaints report, but we're not seeing anything on compliments. And I hope we do get compliments and we can see how, where we are excelling. And that would be nice to see as well. Will that be reported as well to the committee? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we are. All the reports that are going to each board at the moment, they are including compliments. So that will be something we'll include at the end of the year as well in that annual report, because there are many compliments.
Thank you, Councillor Newport. Any other questions or points to raise? Okay, if not, I will go to the recommendation. Is there the recommendation. Just one. That the committee it is for notice. That the committee notes the contents of the formal complaints annual report 24/25 and endorses the continued implication of the local government ombudsman and housing ombudsman complaint handling code. Is that noted? Perfect, thank you. Item 14. Okay, so this begins on page 233 and is the community asset transfer principles and process. I will open up to members for question or comment. Councillor O'Leary.
Sorry, me again. I've got 4 questions, I think. Is it all right if I just do them all in one go, or do you want to do them one by one? Sorry, over there, yeah. Andy, sorry, yeah. All right, okay. I mean, I've written them down, so if you... right, first one. How will you score bids so that everyone knows what good looks like and that it's fair? And will you publish the weighting and scoring matrix? Secondly, how many EOIs are live now? What turnaround times will you work to, and do you have enough staff to meet them? And also, are there any strategic sites not up for transfer? And if so, will you publish that list and explain why they're not? And finally, repeating the question I asked earlier by accident, is given we are expecting government to put a stop or some sort of stop in place to prevent asset disposal and spending outside of normal BAU due to LGR, is it feasible that these assets can be transferred in time? Thank you.
You got all of those, Andy? Okay, I'll hand over to the officer. Thank you.
Right, good evening, members. Thank you for your questions. So the first one in terms of the weighting. So the report sets out the application and the evaluation process and outlines the kind of areas that a business case would need to contain. We haven't set out a scoring as such. There will be a panel that will look at that because it's more of a qualitative exercise rather than a quantitative exercise. And to set scoring would be things like, we would then take in maybe a sort of 2 arbitrary approach, say on the finances, has an organisation got a certain amount of money, but that may not be the right kind of scoring to use. So we haven't actually used it as a scoring. The panel will meet. We will. It's a kind of process that will evolve. So we'll see how the first few go, and if there is a need for a scoring mechanism, we will adopt it. But I say the panel will come to a clear and transparent conclusion as to how the business case that we would ask them to complete has met the criteria as set out in the evaluation process. I think that was my question. Is that okay for question one? I think question two was it about how many have we got live at the moment?
EOIs, how many?
So we've had 10 received, and I suppose there's two ways in which I guess they can be they will come to light. We either, as an organisation, take a decision that we've got surplus properties, and that will be done through the asset management strategy, in which case we would then go out and ask for expression of interest if there's an asset that's been declared surplus, for instance, or there may be an inquiry that we will get on a particular asset that we have yet to declare, or the council has yet to declare as surplus. So the first part of the process would be to see if the asset has got any strategic importance to the council. If it has, then obviously we wouldn't expect a business case to come forward, and that the proposal will be given, the response back to that effect. If it is something that we would want to consider, then that's when it goes to the more detailed business case as set out in the evaluation and application criteria. Is that okay for Q2? Yep. Q3, turnaround time. So turnaround times, again, I think will depend on the number that we get. So I say we've got the 10 at the moment, so they'll go through once if this gets approved. Obviously, the first stage will be are those assets of strategic importance. That will then determine whether we go to the next business case stage. That will then determine how many business cases we receive, which will then determine how resources. So we always keep resources under review. Resourcing the team is part of the asset management action plan. So there's a work stream to make sure the team is resourced. And I think it's something that we'd want to see what kind of responses we get, because we don't want to resource up for something that's not going to be that's not going to take off. But equally, we need to keep the resources that we need under review. Question for strategic sites. So I say that will be the first first part in terms of whether the council's got any assets that have been declared as surplus, and we would have put out for expression of interest. And as part of the asset management action plan, there is a review of the assets going on. Obviously, that will take some time to do, and I think that will start to impact on your question 5. So we will be bringing those asset review or undertaking those asset reviews, and they will indicate whether there are any assets that have no strategic importance or limited importance that we might want to bring forward and put out as expressions of interest. And question 5 was again about whether we've got time to do this, I believe. Is that right? Yeah. So again, I think the first stage will be to see if there's strategic importance. I think then the timescales will depend on how quickly those groups are able to turn around the business cases and the management plans that we're asking for in the application process. And obviously then depending on the number that we get, again, it goes back to my earlier question in terms of my early answer about how we resource. So it's a new process, and I think it's going to be the sort of thing that we're going to have to undertake the first few, see how that goes, and then kind of modify the resources and the timescales accordingly.
Do you want to come back, Councillor O'Leary?
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick couple of clarifications, please, Andy, if that's all right. When we were talking about the scoring matrix or the weighting and whatever you want to call it, you said there was a panel involved. Like who is on the panel? I'd be quite interested to know. And just secondly, when we were talking about the sort of the assets being transferred, and we're thinking about the government putting the stops in place for us to carry on with business outside of BAU, do we have any guide from government about when that might come in? Thank you.
Okay, on your first point, section 1.8 of the principles sets out the type of groups or representatives that will sit on the panel. I think it's also going to depend on what type of asset is being looked at. So, for instance, if it's a leisure asset, there might be more people from the leisure service. If it's a different kind of asset that's delivering different kinds of services, then the panel would be adjusted for some expert knowledge on those particular assets and what they're delivering. So the panel, there's not a fixed group of individuals on the panel, so they'll be drawn from from those group of people that are in 1.8 and bolstered by any particular experts on the asset that's being reviewed.
Just to come in on the point around LGR, obviously, LGR is unknown. We don't know when, once if a decision is made on the unitary formation, when the legislation will be laid down that will prevent us from doing anything else whilst the shadow authority's developed. But what we do know is that if an EOI comes through and we can do the review and we can bring it back to committee for a decision to potentially transfer, that decision will be set and therefore we can continue with that. What the risk is once LGR is announced and once we know the timetable, then if we can't get the decisions in, that will wait for the shadow authority and for then us to work for the shadow authority. So we will have to just adapt, like with everything that we're doing, is adapt to once we know that timetable.
Thank you. Councillor Lisa Newport.
Thank you, Chair, but Councillor O'Leary answered the question and Andy answered it. Thank you.
Councillor James Newport.
Thank you, Chair. How will the risk of poor management be managed?
So the application process obviously asks the group that's applying to outline what those management arrangements are going to be. 1.12 also says after a decision to transfer has been made, a review will be undertaken every 2 years between the council and the acquiring organisation to ensure that the asset continues to deliver against the council's corporate priorities. So there's going to be some checks and balances in terms of that ongoing management after they've taken over. And the application process obviously will look at how, sort of kind of resources, the knowledge and skills that group has got to manage the asset.
Okay, are there any other? Councillor Hoy?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions or points. You mentioned, well, it's been raised on a couple of occasions, I think it's been answered about strategic assets, what will be. Obviously, will the list of what are strategic assets be brought back to this committee to confirm, or will that be done outside of this committee? Secondly, we've got about, it's following up from Councillor Newport's question really. If we transfer an asset to an organisation, will there be something written within the lease to prevent that organisation passing it on to someone else? I mean, we speak from experience from when the leisure contract was transferred to another body which didn't really know how to run some of the operations. That's been taken care of in the new leisure contract, I'm aware, but will these assets mean that if it's passed on to a community association, a community group, that if that community group can't then pass it on to another group without, like, subletting it to another group without us approving it? Or if that community group folds, what happens to the asset then? Will that lease remain with whatever happens to the winding up of that group, or would it revert back to us as a council or whatever council is here? Second question is, we're talking about doing long leases now for assets from now. Will there be an opportunity for, perhaps parish councils which do have long leases on assets, such as Holbridge, a car park and a nature reserve, would it be possible for them to renew those leases now for, say, 125 years, because part of that, the lease they had originally, which was a long lease, has gone. That's it, I think.
Thank you. Just if I may come in first and then I'll hand over. In terms of anything that's classed as just a strategic site, then yes, it would be the intention to come through committee because it would require decisions, investment and things along those lines. In regards to subletting long leases and renewing leases now, I'll hand over to the officers if I may.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. So yes, so the preference would be to go down the route of a long lease, which obviously means that the freehold stays with the council, and the application process, as I've set out, will be quite robust in terms of the organisation's ability to not only maintain and manage the asset upon handover, but also as a long-term development. So, as I know, it's quite challenging and complex to manage assets, and we want to make sure that any organisation that is going to take that on is fully understanding of what that kind of involves. The process does say that if it gets to the business case stage, that the council will provide the group with information regarding the condition of the asset, condition surveys, and the costs associated with managing the building, so that those groups are well aware of what they're kind of undertaking. So there'll be safeguards in the process and the application and evaluation process to do that. In terms of your question about people that've got leases at the moment, and what we'd like to do is to implement a version of this process regarding those groups that are coming forward that want to extend or take on a new lease. So we'll be making sure that the kind of questions in terms of the ongoing management and maintenance of an asset are answered as part of that, as part of the process to offer anything any longer term. So again, there are safeguards that organisations can't just ask for a longer lease, for instance, if they're not in a position to manage and maintain it going forward. So this process will be used as part of those longer leasehold transactions.
Sorry, I think I got most of that. Can I give an example, and I would like to know what would happen with this example? If we passed land over, for example, to an organisation, a community group, and it's land which could be developed for building or for profit, would that be prevented by the lease?
Yeah, there'll be safeguards. I think it's outlined in the process that as part of the disposal contract and agreement, there'll be safeguards in place in terms of subletting, assigning the lease, or trying to dispose of it. So the ultimate aim obviously will be to safeguard the asset for community use and to make sure that organisations don't kind of exploit that for other purposes.
Thank you. Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chair. Just one last point, and it just occurred to me. So any decisions taken on any disposal of land, etc., or transfer of assets, will that only start once all the evidence base has been prepared for the new local plan, i.e., playing pitch strategy, etc., open spaces, and that once that work's concluded?
I believe there's different timetables for those individual pieces of work. So, given that we need to sort of start this and to think about the application that we've already had, I suspect this will need to sort of start before those other documents have all concluded.
Just come back.
Of course.
So Chair, that does worry me in terms of some aspects of the local plan and playing pitch strategy being one of those pieces of work, because we could actually find ourselves left short on provision for our future generations, if you like. So I think we should be very cautious about that, and I'd like to see the timelines in what we're talking about then, because we could end up with an unsound local plan, essentially, and that would be a big problem to this council. So, and hopefully Councillor Wootton and yourself, Councillor Belton, agree with that.
What we can't do, in my opinion, is wait for the local plan to conclude before we continue with these pieces of work. But I definitely hear what you're saying in returns of some of those assets, because we won't be able to determine if they're surplus to requirement until we understand if they're surplus to requirement. There are some that I think we will be able to take an early decision on, as we have done over the course of the last few years, such as some of the pavilions, for example. But I don't think this is a one-size fits all in terms of every single asset, but I think it was set out at the beginning that the first piece of work is to determine, is it surplus to requirement, is it of strategic value, and is it something that we can even consider transferring. So I would be mindful not to wait until there's a completed and adopted local plan before doing some of the work, but
And just for clarity, that's not what I was suggesting. I was suggesting that the evidence base for the local plan, such as the play and pitch strategy, open spaces, as they come forward, our assets actually liaising with planning policy team as that pipeline is coming through. And I'm not suggesting we wait for the completion, because that's just not going to happen. But that is the important part, because I think we could find ourselves potentially leasing things to community groups in good faith, but we might not be able to provide what we need in our local plan to our community. So I think we just need to be cautious around that.
yeah, thank you. And sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you were asking for completion in full. I will pass over to Phoebe, but certainly there is full dialogue regarding those different stages, play and pitch strategy as a core one, because we need to understand that as part of the bigger picture. But I'll hand over to Phoebe to answer any technical questions.
Thank you, Chair. Just to be clear, obviously, the process that Andy has highlighted tonight, it's a process, and obviously we've highlighted that there will be a panel, and of that panel, relevant officers will sit in there. Ones that will include planning, open spaces, members from Paul Brace's team that are working on the play pitch strategy, as well as supporting planning policy. The purpose of that is that then internally we can determine whether the asset, the open space, piece of land in question can be brought forward for a transfer if we determine that actually we believe that there is strategic value, because there is an open piece of land that could place football pitches, 3G pitches that we know we need in the district, for example. We will recommend that the EOI doesn't go any further, because we need to we know that we've got to determine something else. What the process does is just allows them, community entities, parishes, to put forward their expression, so we as a council understand what the parishes want to do. Obviously it links in with the agenda item that Greg introduced at the beginning as well around that, and it also just gives us that oversight with LGR Looming. If there is any opportunities for us to protect some of our land and want it to be used in a certain way, knowing that it's not of street value, we can do that in our assets. But I just wanted to be clear that just because an EOI will come in doesn't mean that we will be recommending that EOI is approved. We will take into consideration everything that we are doing across the council.
Okay, any other questions, members? Councillor Hoy?
Sorry, I just want to make one comment. I know the officer said that if we want to protect our assets, I'm not voting for this policy on the basis of protecting our assets. I'm voting for it on the basis that I think it's a policy that we need, and I don't see it's. I'm not voting for it on the basis of a fire sale of our assets to avoid them going to another unitary authority which we don't ourselves control. That's all. I just got the impression that some people think that, but I think it's a good policy in itself, and that's why I'm voting for it.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy. And I think when we use the word protect, we're very much talking about protecting assets for the community in the space, but I recognise what you're saying. If there are no other questions or points, I would like to move the two recommendations on page 234. Are members happy for me to take those on block? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, recommendation 1, that the committee approves and adopts the principles and process outlined in the report with regards to community asset transfer. Recommendation 2, that the committee agrees to consider future reports on any applications for community asset transfer that are received for decision. Do I have a seconder? All those members in favour? Okay, that is passed. Thank you, members. Okay. Moving on to item 15, which begins on page 247 and is the Asset Management Strategy Action Plan and Property Update. Now, I will just note that if any member wishes to discuss anything relating to Appendix B for this item, I will need to move that the press and public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that there would likely be disclosure of exempt information as defined paragraphs 3 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. So unless members specifically want to talk to the exempt paper, then we'll leave the committee open. But if anything does come up, please let me know before going into the exempt item. Okay, so any questions? Councillor Hoy. Microphone, please, Councillor Hoy.
Thank you for the reminder. Just like to thank Andy for the report. There's a distinct lack of colours on it and the use of words, which means I can understand this one. So starting on page 253 of Appendix A, I know we've got green on target to deliver, green on target to deliver, and then further down on the next page with green on target to deliver with priority projects, and then we've got further down, on the page 255, amber, not yet due. I just think it would be useful to have some indication of dates if amber is not yet due, when will it become green and on target to deliver? I'm not sure when they're going to be delivered by. We've got the dates really, January 26th to June 26th, but I'm just not sure when amber will be due to be delivered from this report. That was all really on it. It's been mentioned about other reports as well about dates, and I think it's one of those things where it's hard to measure the reports, measure that's where we are without the dates.
Thank you. I think that's noted and something we can certainly take forward, because I think we're all in agreement that we'd like to have benchmarking and dates to relate back to. Any other questions or points to raise on this item? No? Okay. In that case, bear with me, this item is for noting. Is that noted, members? Perfect. Okay. Moving on to item 16, which starts on page 263 and is titled Employer Supported Schemes. And this report is by the Director of People and Governance, Nicola. Thank you for holding on to the end. I will open straight up to questions from members. Councillor Hoy.
Not a question. I'm just really pleased to see this coming through. I think we saw some of this last year, and I'm really pleased the new administration is bringing this forward. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy. Nicola, did you want to say anything to the report? Because I know it's something you're happy. Yep. Perfect. Okay. In that case, if members are happy, I would like to go straight to the recommendations set out on page 263. Again, we have two recommendations. Can I take those together? Yep. Okay. Recommendation 1, to approve the introduction of the Fostering Friendly Accreditation and Supporting Policy. Recommendation 2, to approve the introduction of the Employer Supported Policing Scheme and Supporting Guidance. Do I have a seconder? Perfect. All those in favour? Okay, that is passed. Thank you very much, members. Okay, moving on. Item 17, which begins on page 277, which is just the committee work programme. Any points to raise on the work programme, members? No? So are we happy just to note the work programme, noting that it will update as we progress through? Okay, noted. Fabulous. Well, on that case, surprisingly close the meeting at 20:49. Thanks very much.